if people want to say we mishandled the Epstein release, guilty. We did mishandle it.
Will the administration support the results of the midterm elections come November, regardless of what they look like?
Would you encourage him to steer clear of those unfounded claims that he is actually the true victor of the 2020 elections?
I love these questions. Any frequency at all is a problem.
I want to hop into a few clips of J.D. Vance speaking with reporters and attempting to defend the SAVE Act and the MAGA agenda. So leave us a like on the video, helps us out a ton. We're aiming for 100 by the end of the day. Make sure to subscribe, comment for the algorithm, and we can get straight down to the breakdown.
We know that we have in certain jurisdictions illegal aliens who are casting ballots. We know that 80+% of the American people want you to show a voter ID in order to vote, and yet there are a lot of big blue states that make that impossible, will in fact criminalize the act of asking for an ID in order to vote. Why would you criminalize asking for an ID in order to vote unless you wanted to encourage and promote cheating? So this is an important priority for the administration, but more importantly, it's an important priority for the American people to save our elections. The way you save America is by bringing election integrity. It's something that matters. It's a shame that the Democrats aren't going to help us get this done, given that a majority of Democrat voters actually want us to have election integrity in this country. But we've got a good piece of legislation to support the troops, support the farmers, and get Save America Act passed. This, of course, is the first step.
The semantics are important here because they have to talk about this like it's a big deal while also skirting around the fact the fraud has never once amounted to the level of affecting an election, happens at a 0.0001% instance, a little over a dozen occurrences throughout tens of millions of votes. Quite literally, it's more likely that you get struck by lightning than someone votes illegally, which goes into the calculus of why Democrats oppose this, because on the flip side, the bill that they are proposing would disenfranchise millions of eligible voters. We've seen this happen on the state level in Texas and Kansas, where between 4.5 and 13% of the electorate was affected. So it's simply just not worth it. And the real reason these people want to pass it is to help their own chances of staying in power, because this is the party of election fraud, not preventing it, given their president launched the largest attack on democracy on trying to steal the 2020 election, of which they all just defend him for.
Will the administration support the results of the midterm elections come November, regardless of what they look like?
Well, look, of course, we're going to support the results of the midterm elections. We think we're going to win, but ultimately that's up to the American people. But we also think we have to do everything that we can to discourage cheating. Because you will hear Democrats sometimes say, and I love this line, I can't help but laugh at it, cheating isn't that frequent in American elections. Any frequency at all is a problem. A single ballot cast illegally in an American election is, in fact, the theft of the ballot from another American citizen, from an American citizen who deserves to be able to vote. So you're right. You know, the elections, in some ways, the process is already getting started for 2026, but you don't pass a piece of legislation because you think you're going to immediately benefit from it. You pass a piece of legislation because you think the American people are going to benefit from it over the long haul. We have to do it. Save America is not mainly about 2026, to your question. It's actually about saving America's elections well into the future.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they'll do the thing that Trump still hasn't done for 2026 years later. The problem with our election is currently the deep unwarranted mistrust that people have in them, thanks to charlatans like Trump and Vance, who spread these long debunked lies. And that's something that we can't just undo overnight, unfortunately, but it does start with the charlatans stopping the lies. Of course, they have shown no interest in doing it. I think Thomas Massie even makes a hilarious point here. Like, the Republicans won literally everything. They talked about themselves getting this sweeping mandate and how they overwhelmingly destroyed the Democrats, yet we're also supposed to believe the elections are rigged. So is their mandate then because the elections was rigged? It goes back to the usual Republicans playing both sides, where again, they both are just so overwhelmingly popular they won despite the rigging, but the rigging is still a problem.
Would you encourage him to steer clear of those unfounded claims that he is actually the true victor of the 2020 elections?
I love these questions, the unfounded claims. You're basically assuming an answer in the very question that you ask. Manu, what I'd say is we can do a lot. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We're doing so many things. We got the one big beautiful bill passed that cut taxes on Social Security, cut taxes on tips, cut taxes on overtime, delivered thousands of additional dollars into the pockets of the average American family. We're very proud of that. It's one of the things that we talked about in there was we need to talk about it more. We need to tell the American people all the amazing benefits that are in those working families' tax cuts. We also have a lot of other things going on in the country. The president's going to talk about a number of things tomorrow night. I'm obviously not going to get ahead of his remarks, but we can talk about a number of the American people's problems. We can solve a number of the American people's problems, and that's exactly what we're going to work with our House colleagues and our Senate friends to do.
There's actually nothing being assumed in his question. If anything, he asked the softball weak version of it, knowing J.D. Vance would probably scowl and flee away in anger if he asked it for real, where he labels the claims as unfounded rather than entirely debunked. Yet no one they ask in the administration can say that Joe Biden won in 2020. None of them can say Trump should stop repeating these debunked lies because the entire apparatus of the right functions to uphold Donald Trump's ego. And it really is kind of odd when you realize that, but it's true. Like, none of them have to tell these lies, but they do solely because Trump can't cope with having lost in 2020 and he controls so much of the electorate, they think it's better to keep him happy than to be honest with him. And on the bill, right? Who feels better today than when Biden left office financially? The gains for the middle class were wiped out by the tariffs that placed a $1,000 tax on American families and were wiped out by the gas price increases as well. The tax cuts for the middle class, of which, by the way, expire next year, but the rich guy tax cuts stay as they live lavish at the expense of our healthcare and food stamps.
If people want to say we mishandled the Epstein release, guilty. We did mishandle, especially the communications of it.
What do you think should have been done?
I think that we should have just dropped everything at the very beginning. And like, obviously it takes a little time to review the stuff, to find the stuff, to redact things where you have victims and so forth. But we should have just done it as quickly as possible.
But some of the stuff that was redacted, some of the names that were redacted weren't victims.
So, yeah, I've looked into this, and my understanding of this, having looked at a lot of this, but not all of it, is that it is sometimes hard to draw a distinction between victim and co-conspirator. And like, let me highlight this in a very sort of obvious way. Ro Khanna, who's been one of the loudest voices on the Epstein file. Well, he became very loud on the Epstein files the minute Donald Trump became president, didn't seem to care about it during the Biden administration. He actually brought one of the Epstein victims, I think, to the State of the Union last year, or maybe it was the year before last. Well, like, that victim, and I'm not saying she wasn't a victim. I don't know anything about her particular case. She was also listed as a co-conspirator in some of these documents, right? So there's an idea that some of the people who were engaged in the sex trafficking were also, facilitating it as well.
So they were incentivized to get more girls.
Yeah, but what
I love how even now they have to try and paint this in some way against the Democrats. Prior to the release, of course, the Democrats are going to be hurt by this because they're going to be in it. But now it's, well, Democrats only care because of radical TDS. Nobody worried about it before. Well, the files were literally sealed. There was an ongoing trial with Ghislaine Maxwell. The second the files became unsealed, people started talking about getting them released. Trump took the mantle on this voluntarily. It now reflects bad on him because he 180'd that position right after it got out that he was going to be heavily implicated throughout the files. So people are rightfully like, especially with him having allegations against him in there, especially with him being literally the most named person in the files. It's pretty obvious why people are particularly upset with Trump, if I'm being honest. But guys, I'm sure it's just the TDS.